Well, folks, we're talking a lot about how bad Trump is, how bad things could be. It all comes from the fact that we live in an oligarchy. An oligarchy can really just be defined as when rich people have too much control over the government. The government is now bending to the will of rich people. We had a train derailment that was the result of this. We have had shrinking wages for workers as a result of this. We've had anti-union laws that are just now being fought, finally, and in some cases defeated. Thank God. As a result of the oligarchy. I realize that for most of our lives, oligarchy was a word that meant a problem a foreign country has. But it's been the reality we've been living under for years and years. Buckley versus Vallejo, Citizens United. We've been getting losses to these folks. So what do? Well, take a step back. What did we just say? Oligarchy is a problem that we have recognized. So we're off to a good start. Americans acknowledge that you should not have an oligarchy. And we've recognized it in other countries. It's going to be hard for Americans to swallow, but once in a while, it's very useful to look at what other countries have done and then do it ourselves. This is called following their lead. The benefit to this, I'm being sarcastic, but it's truly, we've been well and truly indoctrinated into thinking that everything America does is right because America did it. So, go with me for a moment. It is useful to look at what other countries do because we can find what works, find what has worked historically, and we don't have to experiment. We can just do it. And here's Thom Hartmann talking about how another country got rid of its oligarchs. And I'll tell you, I think we can do just about everything in this.
Deal with our oligarch problem. And, I start out by telling the story of Viktor Medvedchuk.
Yes.
He was the Rupert Murdoch of Ukraine. He was a billionaire oligarch who owned a right-wing television network and a whole bunch of TV stations, along with a bunch of other businesses in Ukraine. And his TV network was constantly spewing hate and division and...
By the way, why would you want to own a TV station if you're an oligarch? Yeah, sure, a TV station can itself be a profitable thing, but just for clarity, so you understand, to run a television station, to actually forget the employees, which cost money, but literally to turn it on and have it function, it's not the same as the internet. The reason everybody on Earth can have a YouTube channel like this, and by the way, if it sounds like fun to you, I encourage you to do it, is because we offload the cost of sending the signal around. But a television station, what makes it a station, why you use that name even, is that it has the ability to project that signal. That costs a tremendous amount of energy. The bills for a TV station, for just running the antenna, the power bills per month are measured in the tens of thousands of dollars for a little one. For a big one, like what Medvedev, I can't even say his name, what that oligarch owned, it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So why is that a good investment for an oligarch? I'll tell you, it's the same reason why Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro were great investments for the billionaires that funded their networks. Well, it's Steven Crowder's potential network, but their shows got funded by wealthy people. Because having a ultra irrational voice in the media is very important to these people. That is a side note he doesn't touch on, but let's watch the rest mostly uninterrupted.
And he was, he owned a bunch of politicians and was promoting tax cuts for the rich and all this kind of stuff, right? I mean, just just an incredible parallel. And then came Vladimir Zelensky. Zelensky ran for president of Ukraine and won on an anti-oligarch, anti-corruption platform. And last year, it became law in the first week of June of last year, of 2022. Zelensky passed a law to strip oligarchs of their ability to influence elections in Ukraine. Yes, you heard that right. He did the same thing that Teddy Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt did. I mean, it was just incredible. They call it de-oligarchization. Seriously, this is not a word I made up. It's what they call their law, the de-oligarchization law of Ukraine. And basically what they're saying is, we don't have a problem with you being rich in Ukraine, and we don't have a problem with you having a political opinion. But if you use your riches to get what you want politically, that's wrong. That's now a crime. And, and what Zelensky said, in fact, when he rolled out this law, May 18th, 2021, he said, in order to succeed, Ukraine must become a rule of law democracy that works in the interest of the many rather than the few. He said, in order to realize our potential, we must create a fair and functional system that protects the rights of the entire population rather than just safeguarding the interests of the oligarchs.
Doesn't that just sound like a prescription for what we need in the United States of America? I think so, personally. And it's not a coincidence that Volodymyr Zelensky was an actor who played a character who specifically was against the corruption in his government on his fictitious television show before he was an actual, he played a candidate, a presidential candidate who was against corruption and then became president. And he became then an actual person against corruption who became president. We can do these very same things. I'm excited to hear that the problems are so similar because their solution worked. It worked so well that Russia felt it had to invade. Good. If it makes Russia that angry, it's something we should strongly consider doing.
Our ultimate objective, this is the president of Ukraine saying this a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, saying our ultimate objective is to destroy the traditional oligarchic order and replace it with a fairer system that will allow Ukraine to flourish. Now, under this law that they passed in Ukraine that went into effect in June of last year, it was passed in 2021, Ukrainian is by definition an oligarch if they meet three out of the four following criteria. Number one, they have a net worth greater than $89 million. Number two, they have significant, in quotes, influence over mass media. Number three, they control a business that exercises monopoly influence.
I just want to really highlight that one of the symptoms of being an oligarch, one of the, I believe, four, did he say? Four listed, of which you need three to qualify as an oligarch, is a significant influence over mass media. Rupert Murdoch, by the by, he's an Australian man, but he's an American oligarch. He's not the only one.
Mass media. Number three, they control a business that exercises monopoly influence over part of the economy. And number four, they involve themselves in politics through funding politicians, political parties, political campaigns, or think tanks. In other words, do they, quote, take part in political life? If they do, if they meet three out of those four criteria, then number one, they're included on the official register of Ukrainian oligarchs published by the government. Number two, they may not run for political office. They may not fund political parties, and they may not have any influence over any meaningful part of Ukrainian political life. Number three, they may not purchase any state assets that are privatized. They're still in the process of privatizing a lot of the old Soviet-era stuff. Number four, they must disclose their assets, and this is where I first learned about this. Was the Financial Times had a piece about this, and They called these exhaustive declarations. And number 5, government officials are now required in Ukraine to report any meeting with any oligarch. Just lunch, you got to report it. Clarence Thomas, you want to go on vacation, you got to report it.
What if we only passed that law? Forget everything else. All were good. All were excellent. But what if we just passed that law where it's required to report a meeting with someone classified as an oligarch? Someone for who 3 of 4 symptoms are absolutely true. What would the rap sheets look like? I have a feeling with conservative Democrats, it would be as long as your arm. With all Republicans, it'd be as long as your leg. And progressives would only have to write down that one time where they burst into a room to tell them to go F themselves. It'd make it very clear who's who. And remember what Trump said about Americans being bled dry. His words. They're bleeding us dry. The ultra-rich. There's an opportunity here. And I'll tell you what, even if you can't convince MAGA people to vote for non-MAGA candidates, you can convince them. You absolutely can convince them to tell the people they have voted for to support these laws. We won't get all. Of course not. We won't get most, but we'll get some. And sometimes a little something's all you need.
Now, we once had a similar tradition here in the United States. In fact, Americans want this right now. When Donald Trump was running for president, you will recall during the Republican primary in one of the debates, he came out and he was talking about the oligarchs, which is kind of ironic because he's one himself. But he said he was speaking of Jeb Bush and the other Republicans on the stage. And he said, they'll be bombarded by their lobbyists that donated a lot of money to them. Again, Jeb raised $107 million, okay? They're not putting that money up because it's a wonderful charity. Well, it's a charity, but for them, not for America. And, and he goes on to his rant about this and says he's going to deal with the oligarch problem. He's going to raise taxes so much that his friends are going to hate him. Well,
of course he didn't. I'm going to let Tommy Heartbreaker remake that point. But just want to laugh. Wicked Foxy Dragon commenting on the what if we made such a list. Republicans would have a heart attack. One of the fun things we could do is take bets on how far out of their chest their hearts will literally burst when that law passes. And for that alone, for the hilarity of watching them cluck and panic and scramble to cancel meetings with wealthy people giving them bribes. Can't you just imagine? Ooh, tasty. I can't wait for it. Let's make it happen.
It says he's going to deal with the oligarch problem. He's going to raise taxes so much that his friends are going to hate him. Well, of course, he didn't do that. He cut taxes on billionaires. But, Donald Trump was always lying through his teeth. But the fact of the matter is that millions and millions of people voted for him because they thought he was going to de-oligarchize America. We had laws like this on the books. In 1907, we had the Tillman Act, which made it a federal crime for any wealthy executive of a large corporation to give any money or support to any candidate for federal office. But states had laws like this too. The Wisconsin law, for example, this was actually on the books in Wisconsin until the Supreme Court overturned it. I'll just read it to you. There's 2 sentences.
Just want to brag about my audience here. Law on the books before the Supreme Court overturned it. Before that point in the show, who said it? Hold on. Anti-corporatist. Once again, well, the Supreme Court would strike it down. Duh. Yes. Supreme Court probably would do everything they can to prevent these things from happening. Wicked Foxy Dragon, in response to my hearts comment, said, wait, they would need hearts. Obviously, they're not using their hearts. For Republicans, that is a superfluous organ. Christ, so close to being witty. But yes, to the anti-corporatist point about the Supreme Court knocking these things down. Number one, we want, first and foremost, the purpose of the vast majority of what we're going to be doing is going to be making it crystal clear to the American people who we're dealing with. If the Supreme Court knocks down a popular bill that would have made us more honest, would have made us have to report, for example, when meeting with oligarchs. We're no worse off than we were, and the people who supported that bill will have a better idea of what the Supreme Court is. Thing number two is that it's not promised that they'll do this. They are also aware of that fact. They're also aware of their legitimacy problem. They're also aware of the fact that they might not exist in 10 years based on the way things are going. They are so corrupt, and knowingly so, that they might throw us a bone. An actual fair decision. Depending on what America looks like when this passes. It's going to be very different if there's a crowd of people outside the Supreme Court looking angry with signs that say, no more aristocracy. If they see everybody clamoring for that, they're going to try to come out and say, well, of course we ruled in favor of the anti-oligarchy bill, and frankly, all these rabble-rousers should be ashamed that they were making such a scene of it. You need to have faith in the court. That might be something they try to do. In other words, ruling in favor of it. It's just going to depend on the context. But regardless, whether we actually get it passed or whether we simply have it as an example of how to clown on these clowns, it's going to be of benefit to us. But a very good point, and I just want to praise the anti-corporatists for being ahead of Thom Hartmann on this. It's impressive.
No corporation doing the business in this state shall pay or contribute or offer consent or agree to pay or contribute, directly or indirectly, any money, property, free service of its officers or employees or thing of value to any political party, organization, committee, or individual for any political purpose whatsoever, or for the purpose of influencing legislation of any kind, or to promote or defeat the candidacy of any person for nomination, appointment, or election to any political office. Now, what were the penalties for this? Quote, any officer, employee, agent, or attorney, or other representative of any corporation who shall violate this act shall be punished upon conviction by imprisonment in the state prison for a period of not less than 1 nor more than 5 years. And if a domestic corporation, it may be dissolved. And if a foreign or non-resident corporation, its right to do business in this state may be declared forfeit. This is the kind of law we need to bring back. This is the kind of law we had in America for 100 years until 5 corrupt Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court blew it up. And by the way, the deciding vote in Citizens United was Clarence Thomas. And this was after he had developed his relationship with Harlan Crow.
Of course.
An American oligarch. After that law was struck down and all the others by Citizens United and its predecessors, the following states had to strike down laws that were very similar to the one that I just read you from Wisconsin. They included Alaska, Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Iowa, Kentucky, Minnesota, Montana, North Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, West Virginia, and, as I read to you, Wisconsin.
Where was California in that? Where was New England? Actually, New England's not that liberal, but where was actually Vermont is not that liberal. They just keep electing Bernie. Notice all those states that Supreme Court opinion by Clarence Thomas, they were conservative or very conservative leaning. What does that tell you about how conservatives generally feel about oligarchs? What message was Trump saying that we looked at earlier? They're bleeding you dry. This is an inroad. This is an issue we can get genuine bipartisan support on. As in support from MAGA, along with progressives. Who will fight this? The genuine uniparty. Those in the pockets of oligarchs already. We did that chart, which takes inspiration from D&D and classifies right wing and left wing into two separate groups. Classifies right wing and left wing into 4 separate groups. 2 right wing groups and 2 left wing groups. It was for this reason, for this issue. One of those groups is anti-oligarchy. We are the most ideologically opposed to the people we are going to be able to ally with on this. And that is going to take some swallowing of pride and some discarding of venom. This is going to be like you know what? This is going to be like allying with Stalin to get rid of Hitler. Doesn't mean that the U.S. liked Stalin. They surely didn't. But all of us could acknowledge that Hitler was a bigger problem. That is what we're going to have to get comfortable doing now. This is a pitch that I recommend we make. What can you do? You can talk to your representative. I'll have a link in the description of the VOD to contact your representative. Tell them send them the Thom Hartmann clip, also linked in the VOD. Tell them you want anti-oligarchy laws. You want them to put one forward. And when somebody does put one forward, we need to start evangelizing. Go to groups you would not normally go to and make the pitch. Tell them the truth about it, which is that this is a bill designed to get rid of those people you say you hate, to get rid of those shadowy groups that are doing this or that. Get behind it. And you have to believe that it's possible to win in order to fight hard enough that you do win. It is possible. I showed you Trump earlier so that you could hear from the wretched horse's mouth exactly the concerns of his voting base. And yes, it's going to be as distasteful for them, for horrible, ridiculous reasons, to work with us as it is for us to work with them. But the good news is, if they see you reaching across the aisle, they're going to know that it's a big deal for you to reach across the aisle. And if we're honest with them about the fact that we will not get along, and we do not need to get along, if we're honest with them about that, we can work with them on this, and we should. And hey, I'll pay them an honest compliment. I think they're misinformed. But I think their culture of demanding that their representatives do what they want, even though they demand terrible things, in my opinion, the core of that is good. The core of that is right. The core of that we should adopt. We should make sure our representatives do what we want. So if you can pay them an honest compliment like that, you don't have to, but if you find that you're able to do that, if you find that you're able to speak honestly about this, you can pitch them on laws like this. We can and we should. These oligarchs are the cause of the vast majority of the problems on the planet Earth. Let's take care of them. Give them the boot. Let's see what y'all have to say.